Up, y'all. I got to deal with this here because, Robert, did you see or hear the prayer that Paula White gave at the Trump rally the other day?
I did indeed.
Okay, so for the folks out there, I'm going to play this for y'all. And also, just so y'all know, I did, because y'all remember, last time Paula White did some stuff, I hit her up, I emailed her, she responded, she was taken out of context, and I said, well, you need to come on to the show. She never did. I texted her this time and also emailed her. She has not responded. But for the folks at home, and let me give the background for a lot of people out there. We're talking about Paula White, who is literally pastoring a black church in Orlando. The Paula White who took over for the previous pastor who passed away. This is the same Paula White who got her credibility off preaching to black folks, preaching on BET. And so this was her, y'all, the other night at the Trump rally. Henry, go to my iPad.
Good evening. Are you ready for a great night of victory? I'm going to ask you to do something. As our president often says, and I've had the wonderful privilege of having an 18-year relationship with him and his family, he says, we worship God, not government. So we're going to start out. I'm going to ask you to grab that person's hand next to you, if you don't mind standing up all over this beautiful arena, and just grab that sweaty hand that you've been holding. I believe in the power of unity. And as we begin to make declarations and come to the Father in prayer, Father, I come to you in the name of Jesus. And first and foremost, I give you thanks for our great United States. I give you thanks for our president and for your blessings and your goodness. Your word declares in Psalm chapter 34, verse 1, that I will bless the Lord at all times, and his praise shall continually be in my mouth. So we thank you and we bless you, God, for your goodness, for your grace, for your mercy. I pray for the Spirit of the Lord to rest upon our president. And let your favor cause his horn, his power, to be exalted according to Psalm chapter 89, verse 17. Lord, your word says in Psalm chapter 2, verse 1 through 4, why do the nations conspire and the peoples plot in vain. The kings of the earth rise up, and the rulers band together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, let us break their chains and throw off their shackles. The one enthroned in heaven laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. Father, you have raised President Trump up for such a time as this. You are a God that reveals secrets. So reveal the secret and the deep things to President Trump, according to Daniel chapter 2, verse 22. Make known unto him the mystery of your will. I declare that skillful and godly wisdom have entered into the heart of our president, and knowledge is pleasant to him. Father, we ask you to compass him with men and women and make their heart and ears attentive to godly counsel, to do that which is right in your sight. Now, I need you to really go with me here. Let every evil veil of deception of the enemy be removed from people's eyes in the name which is above every name, the name of Jesus Christ. For you said in your word, so I'm going to deal with some principalities now, okay? Because you said in your word in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, that we're not wrestling against flesh and blood, but against principalities, powers, against rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. So right now, let every demonic network that has aligned itself against the purpose, against the calling of President Trump, let it be broken, let it be torn down in the name of Jesus. Let the counsel of the wicked be spoiled right now. According to Job chapter 12, verse 17, I declare that President Trump will overcome every strategy from hell and every strategy of the enemy, every strategy, and he will fulfill his calling and his destiny. Destroy and divide their tongues, O Lord, according to Psalm chapter 55, verse 9. Give President Trump strength to bring forth his destiny, according to Isaiah chapter 66, verse 9. Let the secret counsel of wickedness be turned to foolishness right now in Jesus' name. And I declare that no weapon formed against him, his family, his calling, his purpose, this counsel will be able to be formed. Now I declare that you will surround him and protect him from all destruction. Let the angel of the Lord encamp around about him, around his family, according to Psalm chapter 34, verse 7. Establish him in righteousness, and let oppression be far from him, according to Isaiah 54:14. I deploy the hand of God to work for him in the name of Jesus. I secure his calling, I secure his purpose, I secure his family, and we secure victory in the name which is above every name, the name that has never failed for this nation and for my life, the name of Jesus Christ. And everybody said, amen.
Now I'm going to let Robert, Johanna, and Greg weigh in just a moment. But let me say a few words first. Since Pastor Paula White wants to quote scripture, you should go to Psalm 1:1, where it said, the godly do not walk in the counsel of the wicked. I dare say, Pastor Paula White, the wicked is when you are a president who allows people on the border to somehow be sleeping on cement floors. How you would go to court and say, we don't even have to give them toothbrushes. I dare say, if you call yourself a so-called Christian, you would have the decency to treat human beings like human beings. Here's what I also want to know, Pastor Paula White. When Reverend William Barber and other preachers and ministers of the gospel and Jews and Buddhists and others had a prayer walk from the church here in New York Presbyterian to the White House, why did this administration lock them out of Lafayette Park? I also want to know, Pastor Paula White, why you as a pastor did not have the courage and the decency to tell Donald Trump why you are afraid to meet with other ministers of the cloth who you might disagree with. See, if you actually have God on your side, if you supposedly have Jesus on your side, then you would not be afraid to meet with other ministers of the gospel. You also said that the evil veil of deception be removed. Please explain to me how you as a pastor defends a man who lies and lies and lies. Please, as a pastor, explain to me how you're supposed to be telling folks to speak truth when you support a man who lies without a doubt, who lies about lies every single day. Please tell me how you can talk about every demonic network aligned against Trump. If you're going to pray that thing, then specify that thing. What networks are you talking about, Pastor Paula White? See, what I cannot stand is when you have pastors who pimp God, pastors who have not a prophetic word, but a partisan word. See, a prophetic word means you ain't afraid to meet with somebody who you disagree with. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., prophetic. Had no problem meeting with folks who disagree with. But see, Pastor Paula White, you support a man who will not meet with people who he simply do not like. How do you dare support a man who routinely trashes women and denigrates women, children of God? How do you not say a word? You stand in front of a nearly all-white rally in Orlando, thundering this particular prayer, saying God is going to cover Trump, saying that God raised Donald Trump up. But see, I got to go to my Bible. I do remember that God said, oh, so y'all want a ruler? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and give y'all a ruler. Y'all, I remember God saying, I told y'all, you don't need a king. But the people said, no, we want a king. Okay, y'all can have Saul. And then what happened? Lord, they were upset. Man, no, don't come complaining to me. Y'all said y'all wanted a king. See, that's what's really going on here, Pastor Paula White. You are misusing the word in defense of somebody who you know ain't even a real Christian. See, I would rather you go ahead and just have some basic decency and respect and say that the reason you support Donald Trump is because he's giving y'all conservative judges, because y'all want to overturn Roe v. Wade. Y'all want to overturn same-sex marriage. See, I'd rather have the decency to tell the people that, as opposed to cloak yourself in the word and stand there as a pastor and somehow pray that kind of prayer. See, the God that I serve, the Jesus that I bow down to, the one that I pray to, knows full well that he would not sit here and accept nor give cover, nor give praise, nor give acceptance to what is happening in 1600 Pennsylvania every single day. There is no way in the world, Pastor Paula White, the God that I know, the Jesus that I know, will say that what happens there is acceptable. I know the God that I know and the Jesus that I know will not allow somebody who would denigrate and desecrate people all the time. I know also the same God wouldn't be happy if a president has the nerve to send a press release out saying he's going to a church to pray with the victims of a shooting in Virginia, and he walks in church with his golf spikes on to accept the prayer just for him and wasn't even good enough to stay for the whole service. Because see, the God I know is a man who's good enough that when he had the shooting in Pittsburgh, the people there said, we don't even want you to come. See, if you actually walked with the Lord, if you actually presented yourself as being somebody who loves the Lord, then synagogues wouldn't be turning you away. Churches wouldn't be turning you away. Mosques wouldn't be turning you away. People of faith wouldn't be turning you away. Because see, the last I checked, the only kind of person who people of faith turn away is darkness, is evil, are wicked individuals. And so that's going to be a day of reckoning for you, Pastor Paula White. That's going to be a day when you're going to have to answer to who you supported. And that day might come real soon. And see, I ain't talking about just when you got to deal with Jesus and the Lord on this. You're going to deal with this with the very people who elevated you. You're going to have to deal with whether or not how you defend the demonic positions of this particular president. You're going to defend the demonic positions where you have somebody who chooses to give more wealth to the wealthy and says the hell with the poor. You're going to have to defend Paula White and administration that have the audacity to say we will cut the food that go to the poor. Please explain to me what Bible you serve. I'm sorry, I got an iPad, an iPhone, and an iPhone. I got the Bible on all four of these devices. Please let me know which one of these Bibles that I can somehow discover to defend somebody who don't care about the poor, somebody who does not care about the hopeless, somebody who does not care about the needy. Please show me the last time this man had any sense of decency or respect to those individuals. I've yet to actually see it, Pastor Paula White. And again, I would love to have a theological conversation with you. I would love to have you to sit here and walk through the text to explain to me how what is happening for this administration is biblical. Because, see, I just thought with the whole line. How do you defend a man you say is godly? You said God, this is what you said. You said God raised President Trump up for such a time as this. What that means is that you, as a pastor, you are suggesting that God co-signs everything that he has done. Are you willing to tell God that? Are you willing to pray that every single night? Please tell me that. See, Pastor Paula White, I'm more than welcome to have you sit in this chair. And I'll have Reverend William Barber sit in that chair. And I'll have Reverend Jim Wallace sit in that chair. And I'll open a chair for one of your other friends. I would love for you to come here and discuss this. And let me remind you, you came on the radio show WVON in Chicago when you were pushing your book. I had you on the show then. You were on the stage at Bishop T.D. Jakes' conference. I was there. See, you might remember, I'll pull a video because I shot the video when my wife received one of the awards for her work, for her foundation work. You were on stage presenting the award. See, I got your cell phone, Pastor Paula White. I got your email. See, so I'm a child of God. I'm a Christian author. And so why won't you have the conversation? Why won't you sit down with pastors who disagree with this president and have a real theological conversation? You had one a couple of years ago at Bishop T.D. Jakes' leadership conference. Oh, you remember? Father Michael Flager was on stage. Father Joshua Dubois, pastor, was on stage. You remember? Bishop Harry Jackson was on stage. Bishop Jakes was sitting in the audience. The four of y'all, it was moderated by April Ryan. Why won't you have that conversation again so we can go over what has taken place in the last 2.5 years of Donald Trump's presidencies? See, I would love for you to explain to me these actions. I would love to hear you break down why it's godly to have a president who trashes people. Is that godly? Is that what Jesus died for? Is that what Jesus wanted? I would love for you to explain that to me, because I would dare say you can't explain it. I would dare say that your support of Donald Trump is because of his tax policy, not because of his poor policy. I would dare say you support Donald Trump not because of what he does for the needy, what he does for the wealthy. I would dare say that Donald Trump's presidency aligns with your prosperity gospel. And I would say that ain't got nothing to do with Jesus Christ. That ain't got nothing to do with the poor, the disenfranchised. It has nothing to do with the people who are suffering and who are hurting. What it has to do is with the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. Every single one of us are going to have to be held to account one day. And you're going to have to be held to account for that prayer, for what you preached. And you gave all those scriptures out. And then you said from every strategy from hell. So are you then saying that those who oppose Donald Trump have been planning this from hell? Are you actually suggesting, by virtue of your prayer, that if you oppose Donald Trump, that you are doing the bidding of the devil? If you say that every strategy from hell, what you're saying is that if there is somebody who opposes what Donald Trump says and does, that means that they are an imp. They are doing the work of the devil. Is that what you're saying? Or you're saying that all of these Christian pastors out here, the same ones who opened their church pulpits up to you to preach prior to Donald Trump, are you saying those individuals have been planning things in hell? Are you saying that somehow that they are doing the devil's work against Donald Trump? I didn't say it. You said it. I would love nothing more for you to clarify what you said. There won't be any yelling, won't be any cursing, won't be any of that. We're going to have us a nice Christian conversation. I don't need no help. It could be me and you. You know what? I'll make it easier on you. I do it in your church in Orlando. I will fly to Orlando and I'll bring my cameras with me to have the very conversation. If you are going to stand up as a pastor and give that kind of prayer, then you also need to explain the kind of prayer. Because remember, Paula White, last time you told me you got misquoted. Remember the email you sent me? You sent an email to me saying that you were out of the country and you had been misquoted when you made those comments on Jim Baker's show. You remember that? Oh, I remember that. See, I remember the email where we went back and forth. And see, I'll pull up in a second. But I really want you to explain this because I really want the pastors out there who support Donald Trump to really defend what he says and does. And I want you to show me biblically where it is so I can be sure that we serve the same God, the same Jesus. Time for altar call. Robert, what's your thoughts?
Well, I think this is a perfect example of why we need to have a separation between church and state. I've worked on too many campaigns throughout the years of them dragging these pastors around, creating rent-seeking activities where pastors will endorse anybody for a healthy contribution, and candidates will pretend to be whatever religion you want them to be in order to get the pastor's congregation behind them. We need to have the church be the church and have politics be politics and not commingle the two to this extent. I remember nothing sadder than 2003 when George Bush was dragging T.D. Jakes and all these other black pastors around with him for the faith-based initiative because he promised him 2 or 3 biscuits, etc. So let's separate these things out and make sure that we aren't commingling our politics with our religious life.
Johanna?
I think Robert made an excellent point, the whole notion about separation between church and state. The fact of the matter is Minister Paula White, she's doing her job, right? She's been asked to serve a particular role.
Her job is to be the pastor of the church that Zachary Timms and his wife built. That's her job.
Well, part of it is also to advise.
Okay, go ahead.
To be the spiritual advisor.
I just want to remind folks it's the church that Zachary Timms built.
That I understand, but another aspect of her job is to advise, to spiritually advise the president. And the fact that churches are not being taxed, right? I think that there should be clearly a separation between a state and churches. And another interesting point is that your God, your definition of your God, is probably different from her definition of her God, right? So who's right here, right?
Hold up. No.
This president is immoral, But based on her definition of God, this president is righteous,
hold on, I'm sorry.
It's the reality, right?
Moses asked, who sent me? God said, I am that I am. The word is the word. All I'm simply saying is, see, this is real simple. Baby, the word is the word. And I'll say Paula White.
And it has different interpretations.
No. This is real simple.
And it's not defending her.
No, this is real simple.
That's just for
the word is the word.
Yes.
All I want, Pastor Paula White, is to show me in the word and defend the policies.
I'm sure she can show you.
I don't think she can. No, I don't think she can.
Because the Bible is just like the U.S. Constitution.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
There is a law to support it, right?
No, it's not.
And I'm sure she can support whatever she wants.
The Bible talked more about the poor than it did the rich.
Of course.
And see, I can show the policies. And I want her to defend, Greg, the policies versus the word.
And I'm sure she can defend it. I agree with it, but I'm sure she can defend it.
Well,
she
can't use the Bible to defend it. But I think that, and I agree with you on this, this is the 190th anniversary of David Walker's appeal, 1829. David Walker said, if you're going to be a Christian, black people, go to the people who have you enslaved and ask them a couple of questions. Number one, you ask them if they're Christians. If they say yes, then you ask them, is slavery wrong according to the Bible? If they say yes, then you ask them, will you let me go? If they say no, David Walker writes in his appeal that they are not Christians, but in fact they don't. And you have now been cleared by God to end your condition by any means necessary. Now let's look at this woman. When I hear her It reminds me of Charles Coughlin from the 1930s. Father Coughlin, the Catholic bishop, who a Catholic minister outside Detroit. I'll be in Detroit tomorrow for October. The Reparations Conference begins today. But Coughlin was on the radio talking to millions of white Catholics, railing against the Jews, railing against the New Deal. They're not Christians. This is fascism, as you said. It is corporatism, and they are in the guise of Christianity. But if you take David Walker at his field, what she's praying to, I agree with you, is very different than what you're praying to, Roland, and in your humanity, in T.D. Jakes' humanity, in the humanity of the people that Robert talked about who invited her into those pulpits. You're extending divine inspired humanity to her. But in rejecting you, David Walker would say, oh, we're clear now. We end our oppression by any means necessary. This is not a Christian, in fact, that we've just seen. That is, in fact, the devil. And
I think that we're also witnessing the church playing a huge role in the political process, right?
Of course.
The church is not supposed to
as
be...
it has begun. That's American.
Let's clarify. Let's clarify.
Because if you're not...
Let's clarify.
There's a separation.
No, let's clarify.
No.
Let's clarify. We said the church. No, what we are dealing with are white, conservative,
that's right,
evangelicals.
That's right.
You're dealing with
black pastors too.
No. You deal, but it's a few of them. But you're dealing with the Franklin Grahams of the world.
Come on, brother.
Who wanted to deny the Christianity of Obama, but wanted to praise the demonic Christianity of Donald Trump.
That's right.
See, that's what you're dealing with. See, again, I'm gonna call it like it is. These people only care about conservative judges because they want Roe v. Wade and the same-sex marriage to be overturned.
That's right.
That's all they care about. And all I'm saying is put it out there. But don't stand there and talk about my God and what's demonic and what's evil.
I mean, why can't they do that? I mean, in other words, why can't they just say, we want to impose a white nationalist Christian theocracy on everyone in the country? Why can't they say that to you?
Because they think we boo-boo the fool. And they're sitting here knowing that if you do that, then your true intentions will be out there, and you cannot cloak yourself in the throne. You can't cloak yourself in the blood of Jesus.
Lord have mercy.
That's the real deal.
Like my mama.
And see, they don't and they don't want to do that. That's why I need y'all to understand, Robert. Jerry Falwell Jr., who's not a minister, who's caught up in this pool boy controversy in Miami. Robert Jeffress, all of these conservative evangelicals, not a single one of them would sit down with Reverend Barber or Reverend Jim Wallace. In fact, Jerry Falwell Jr., when Reverend Barber and the Poor People's Campaign went down to Lynchburg, Virginia, he sent the word to the police department of the university, if they step foot on this campus, arrest them. And ordered to all the student body, don't you dare go visit that church when they come to town. That's, if you want to say demonic, that's demonic when you are so scared of the power of poor people that you say, don't you dare step foot on this campus. Robert, final comment.
Well, this is a perfect example of what I was saying previously, is that the church has been its most effective when it's that third rail, when it is united not around a particular candidate, not around a particular political party, but an independent actor for the Christian community. As long as we have pastors and churches pledging allegiance to any candidate, any party, it dilutes their message because they have now sold out to the earthly powers and not to the divine power above.
Pastor Paula White, these church doors are open. You can come here anytime. I'll go to you. You can come here. You're always in D.C. And we can have that conversation. Because if you truly believe in the Word of God, you wouldn't be afraid of another Christian, would you? You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. By going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com, you can make this possible. Let's talk about St. Louis, where a black police officer is speaking out about racial division in the police department. Officer Milton Green, folks, was shot by one of his co-workers 2 years ago. Green is black, and the person who shot him is white. Police Chief Lawrence O'Toole says it was friendly fire, but Green says it was racism and is filing a suit against the St. Louis Police Department. Now, folks, let me explain to you exactly what happened here. A guy had an accident. He was sitting here, then they were chasing him. Green hears it, grabs his gun badge. He yells, "I'm a cop." Cop tells him, "Put your gun down." Another cop comes along while saying put your gun down, shoots Green. He has since been on disability, has been unable to use his right arm. The white union raised money for the cop who shot him. Green says he has not gotten the kind of support he needs from the police department, and he says it's dead wrong. Now, the chief, of course, has disagreed with that. The question is, what happens now? Joining us now is Milton Green's attorney, Javad Kazeli, and Reddit Hudson, founder of the National Coalition of Law Enforcement Officers for Justice Reform and Accountability. First of all, I want to go to you, Javad. When you look at this story here, I mean, again, I've heard from many other black cops who said, man, the worst position I want to be in is when I'm not on duty or I'm not in uniform.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. This is one of the most egregious cases I've ever seen. It's actually a little bit worse than the way that you described. Officer Green saw these two suspects. One of them pointed a gun at Officer Green. He pulled out his weapon that he's supposed to have on him all the time, pointed it at the guy. The guy ran away. All of a sudden, he's surrounded by other police officers. They tell him to get on the ground. He gets on the ground, puts his gun down, identifies himself as a police officer. The detective on the scene recognizes him, tells him to stand up. He stands up, calmly is talking to the detective with his badge in his hand. And mind you, this is Missouri. One of the most lax gun laws. You can have a gun, but he has his badge in his hand. All of a sudden, another cop shows up late and just looks at Milton, immediately yells, put down your gun, and shoots him, hitting him in his arm, ending his career. Now we're 2 years after this has happened, and Milton's disability payments haven't even been adjudicated yet. His house is in foreclosure. You know, he's basically losing everything because the city is not supporting him.
And what's crazy here is, again, a police department not owning up to it. The cop who shot him, any charges filed against him?
No charges filed against him. We did learn this week when we filed the lawsuit, and we served it on the police department. They came back and they rejected the lawsuit because they've told us that he no longer works for the police department. We've been told that has nothing to do with Officer Green's case, that he's just not there anymore.
Wow. Reddit Hudson, again, we hear this from a lot of black police officers who say they are scared to death when they have to be on the other end of the barrel of a gun by another cop.
Man, Roland, you have black officers who are scared to be on duty now with some of their fellow officers. As I think you referenced earlier on social media, one of my colleagues who's a police officer with St. Louis City right now, Detective Heather Taylor, is the president of the Ethical Society of Police Officers, which is a predominantly black police officers association, one of the better black municipal police officers associations in the country. You have officers online posting things like they hope she bleeds to death because she's consistently called for accountability among police officers on that department. And the fact that that officer is no longer with the department, I guarantee you he left voluntarily. He wasn't forced out. One of the points of emphasis in a case like this that I would like to make, especially for officers around the country, is this union. The St. Louis Police Officers Association is a union of police officers that did not back Milton Green in this situation. They did back the guy who shot him in this situation. There was another officer, black officer, Luther Hall, who was beaten unmercifully by 4 white officers here in St. Louis City at a protest during the Jason Stockley verdict. If you remember that, there were protests following the not guilty verdict for Jason Stockley, who was the officer who announced the murder of a black man and then carried it out, almost execution style. Beat Luther Hall within an inch of his life. That police officers union offered him no support. So to those officers around the country, black officers who belong to these unions, man, stop giving your money to these unions that will do nothing for you and won't represent your interests or your community's interests at any time and will always stand against you. Witness the union in Cleveland now that fought for the officer that killed Tamir Rice to get his job back.
Javad, your client, Milton Green, still can't use his right arm?
He cannot. He can't hold a gun. I mean, he can use his hand, but when he shows it, he can't fully squeeze. He actually has to do workouts with a soup can right now. He can't properly hold a gun and fire it. He would be a liability to himself if he were on the streets. He hasn't been back to work since the incident occurred, and tomorrow will be the 2-year anniversary of that. And to talk about the Stockley cases, we actually represent about 16 people that were beaten the same night that Officer Hall was beaten. And the police department's position seems to be, did I lose?
No, you're there. Go ahead.
Okay, good. The police's position seems to be that the 120 people that they beat and pepper sprayed that night, that was lawful. But randomly, the only person that they made a mistake on was the one undercover police officer who happened to be black. The night that Milton was shot, he came in, he was rushed with a officer down call, was rushed to the hospital. The acting police chief and the person who's the current police chief both met with Milton. He told them what happened. He said everything was calm. You know, the perps were gone. And then this guy shot me. About a half hour later, the acting police chief goes out and gives a press conference and states that Milton was shot in a crossfire. An absolute lie. That white police chief is now suing St. Louis, claiming racial discrimination because he wasn't promoted to the full-time position.
Wow.
Roland,
Go ahead, Reddit.
None of this should be disconnected from the recent exposure that officers all over the country, including officers in Philadelphia, St. Louis, and Phoenix, got for their social media posts identifying themselves as either affiliated or sympathizers with white supremacist organizations that hold white supremacist and racist views. There are any number of officers on our streets as we speak that police according to those ideologies, and it's reflected in the way that they treat us. And we've seen it time and time again. Now is the time to hold officers accountable. It's not time for sensitivity training, none of that. Punishment is the order of the day. If you want to change police culture, you have to start holding people accountable.
And what you're speaking about, of course, we had the Plainview Project, a database produced by Philadelphia attorney Emily Baker White. We had her on the show. And what you're talking about is more than a dozen police officers under investigation in St. Louis for a series of racist social media posts, some of them around the time Green was shot. In addition to that, you also have 72 cops pulled off of the streets in Philadelphia and placed on administrative duty as a result. And I'm sorry, in St. Louis, 22 cops have been barred from bringing their cases to the circuit attorney's office. Last question for both of you, Javad. The point that we keep making, we keep hearing, oh, you know, it's a few bad apples. But what we're seeing fundamentally is we have fundamental issues in police departments, unions that protect them, and politicians are afraid to go against these police unions.
So I was a federal prosecutor back in a former life, and I wasn't even born in America. And I really love American idioms. And every time I hear that idiom, it's a few bad apples, I always ask people, what's the next part of that phrase? And that's the bad apples spoil the bunch. When other officers watch this, allow this to happen, and then come out and say that the people who do bad things are actually the heroes, that makes a lot of people question them. Milton has talked publicly that other officers went online and criticized him for what he did. They said that he was being a fool. He deserved what he got. You know, why is he asking for handouts? He says that his kids, who were raised in a house with a police officer, now, when they see other officers, they generationally are now afraid of these officers. Until we have real systematic changes with the way that the St. Louis Police Department polices, you can't expect the citizens to trust them. And the real irony is that was Milton's job. He was a community resources officer. It was his job to mend bridges between the police department and the community. And now he's seen what the police department has done and how they've abandoned him.
Reddit?
Black officers, wake up, man. A police officer will shoot you, disable you, and then have his colleagues question why you're looking for handouts. What we need now is leadership. We have that opportunity here in St. Louis. We have a black chief of police. We have a black public safety director. We need them. to stand in the cut, man, and make a stand against these kinds of systemic abuses that reflect the racism that's at the foundation of police culture, not just here in St. Louis, but all over the country. And until we get that and hold some of these people accountable, we're going to see what we see. But I always say, as you know, Roland, I think it starts from inside. We need a critical mass of us inside the system ready to address these issues head on.
Absolutely. Javad Kazelli, Milton Green's attorney. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Reddit Hudson, thanks for joining us as well.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, back to that Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment. All right, folks, they're back. MarijuanaStock.org is another great investment opportunity. If you were lucky enough to invest in their last crowdfunding campaign, you know they raised a ton of money in just a few months investing in legal marijuana farms. Those initial investors now own shares of a publicly traded company, and they are on fire. Now they have a new investment opportunity that is as good, if not even better, than the last one. I'm talking about industrial hemp CBD. For those who don't know, the hemp plant is the cousin to marijuana with a much higher concentration of CBD, which means hemp CBD gives you all the medical benefits of marijuana without getting you high. Until recently, hemp farming was practically illegal in the U.S. and heavily regulated by the DEA. However, the 2018 Farm Bill changed all of that, making it legal to grow hemp CBD in the U.S. and creating one of the largest commodities worldwide. They need land to grow all the plants. Now, this makes for an incredible investment opportunity, and that's where our good friends at 420 Real Estate come in. Their business model is simple. They buy land that supports hemp CBD grow operations and lease it to licensed, high-paying tenants. That's right, they are hemp CBD landlords, and you can get in on the action. You can invest in the crowdfunding campaign for as little as $200 up to $10,000. Like I said, you don't want to miss out on this. To invest, go to marijuanastock.org. That's marijuanastock.org. And yes, this is a black-owned company, so you want to try it and get in the game. Back to your Roland Mark Unfiltered. All right, folks, let's now talk reparations. That was a congressional hearing today on this very issue. It was led by, of course, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. She's the sponsor of H.R. 40. For a long time, Congressman John Conyers sponsored H.R. 40. And so this was the first hearing on this issue in more than a decade, according to Ron Daniels. I talked to him this morning on the Tom Joyner Morning Show. There were a number of people who were speakers, including Ta-Nehisi Coates, Danny Glover, but also Dr. Julianne Malveaux, who's often on our show. Here is Danny Glover speaking today before Congress.
A national reparations policy is a moral, democratic, and economic imperative. I sit here as the great-grandson of a former slave, Mary Brown, who was freed by the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. I had the fortune of meeting her as a small child. Despite much progress over the centuries, this hearing is yet another important step in the long and heroic struggle of African Americans to secure reparations for the damages inflicted by enslavement and post-emancipation and racial exclusionary policies. Many of the organizations who are present today at this hearing are amongst the historical contributors to the present national discourse, congressional deliberations, and Democratic Party presidential campaign policy discussions about reparations. We are also indebted to the work of Congressman John Conyers for shepherding this legislation. The adoption of H.R. 40 can be a signature legislative achievement, especially within the context of the United Nations International Decade of People of African Descent.
Ta-Nehisi Coates, of course, who wrote about reparations in The Atlantic, was also one of those who spoke on today's panel.
Yesterday, when asked about reparations, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell offered a familiar reply. America should not be held liable for something that happened 150 years ago, since none of us currently alive are responsible. This rebuttal proffers a strange theory of governance, that American accounts are somehow bound by the lifetime of its generations. But well into this century, the United States was still paying out pensions to the heirs of Civil War soldiers. We honor treaties that date back some 200 years, despite no one being alive who signed those treaties. Many of us would love to be taxed for the things we are solely and individually responsible for. But we are American citizens, and thus bound to a collective enterprise that extends beyond our individual and personal reach. It would seem ridiculous to dispute invocations of the founders or the greatest generation on the basis of a lack of membership in either group. We recognize our lineage as a generational trust, as inheritance. And the real dilemma posed by reparations is just that, a dilemma of inheritance. It is impossible to imagine America without the inheritance of slavery. As historian Ed Baptist has written, enslavement, quote, shaped every crucial aspect of the economy and politics of America, so that by 1836, more than 600 million, or almost half of the economic activity in the United States derived directly or indirectly from the cotton produced by the million-odd slaves. By the time the enslaved were emancipated, they comprised the largest single asset in America, $3 billion in $1860, more than all the other assets in the country combined.
Now, Ta-Nehisi, obviously an author, Danny Glover's an activist, but where were the economic voices? And that did not sit really well with Dr. Julianne Malveaux, who is an economist, and she sort of shook the panel up. This is what she had to say.
I am delighted to be here because this hearing is not on time, it's like overtime. It's more than time for us to deal with the injustices that African American people not only have experienced in history, but continue to experience. I'm an economist, so economics is a study of who gets what, when, where, and why. It's a study of the way the factors of production are paid. The elements are land, labor, capital, and the secret sauce. Some people call it entrepreneurial ability, some call it creativity. Land gets rent, labor gets wages, capital gets interest, and the secret sauce gets profits. But the work of predatory capitalism is to figure out how to extract more from the factors of production toward capital and away from people. And we've seen that in the past 3 decades with our own economy, but more importantly, enslavement was about the devil's work of predatory capitalism. Indeed, enslaved people got no wages, and we represented capital for other people. And so after enslavement, first of all, enslavement was the foundation on which our country was built. So anybody who says, well, I didn't have any slaves, no, you didn't have to have any. What you had to do was experience them, enjoy the fact that they were here, enjoy the fact that their labor made it possible for there to be a Wall Street, a bond market, and all of that. But beyond that, the post-enslavement case for reparations can be made by examining racially hostile public policy and government complicity to white supremacy.
All right, folks. Now, what was real interesting about the panel is that, I mean, you had folks like her and Ta-Nehisi and others who were there, invited by Democrats to speak. Then the Republicans, press play.
That this is not exactly true. Mr. Glover mentioned all of the studies and books that have been written on the subject. I would argue, in fact, that in the 10,000-year history of slavery on every continent, there is not a single example of slavery that has been more studied than slavery in America from the 17th century to the 19th century. So it is actually not true that we have not told the truth, that we don't know our history. Moreover, in the past 50 years, if we're talking about what scholars in America, in the American social sciences, have directed their attention towards, it is hard to find a subject on which more books have been written that has been more studied than racial inequality. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Mr. Owens.
Well, there's a difference between what somebody said was being studied and then what really was done. Okay, so then, of course, you had this dude, Burgess Owens. Okay, y'all, here are his credentials. Former NFL player, Fox News commentator. That's the best Republicans could come up with? Press play.
The greatest legacy from my dad, who served in World War II, came home, could not do his postgraduate down in Texas because of Jim Crow laws. So put out a lot of letters, ran across a box when he passed away of hundreds of rejection letters. He used that as motivation because he eventually got to Ohio State where he got his PhD and went on being a very successful entrepreneur, college professor, researcher, and someone who was very proud of our race. He reached back to his very last days to the young people, giving them hope that this country, they can succeed, and if they really wanted to, and if they pull themselves up by their bootstraps, worked harder than the next guy. That's not a racist deal, guys. That's the American way. We work harder than the next guy. Greatest legacy from him was my belief that I would do everything I could to make sure he was proud that I held his name. The greatest thing for my mom, my dad, is I never, ever even thought about disrespecting mom.
Okay, I don't know what in the hell any of that got to do with what in the hell they were talking about. I just don't, whatever. All right, let's introduce my panel, folks. A. Scott Bolden, former chair, National Bar Association, Political Action Committee. Monique Presley, legal analyst, crisis manager. Mark Thompson, host, Make It Plain. Mark, of course, was also there in the hearing today. Mark, what was interesting, again, I don't even know who the hell these two are, okay? And so here you got this dude, Burgess Owens, his whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps, as if 400 years did not exist, as if you do not have undeniable data that shows redlining. See, they keep talking about, obviously, 150 years since slavery ended. Well, what took place in 150 years? What took place after Reconstruction? What still takes place when you talk about the home foreclosure crisis and the subprime loans as well? 53% of black wealth wiped out because of homes. And so, what planet were they really on?
Well, there's a thank you for having me, by the way, Roland. Good to see everyone. There's a reason why you haven't heard of them, because they were handpicked by the minority members of the committee. And in some of the other interactions, you saw them refer to these individuals by first name. Obviously, they have relationships. If the four of us decided to be black conservatives and Uncle Toms like they are, we'd be big fish in a small pond. And that's how you make a name for yourself. I even engaged the young man, Coleman Hughes, because we were on a panel together on another network. And because he keeps saying that we shouldn't get individual checks. And nobody was really making that argument at the hearing. In fact, when in COBRA, the National African American Reparations Commission, they've been talking about some of the economic things that you alluded to. Maybe we'll get into that a bit later. And I said, Coleman, why don't you stop saying this thing about this individual check? But it's a red herring to inflame the right wing and fearmonger whites that we're coming for their individual money. And that's the only role they play. Their argument was completely
feels like a welfare check.
That's right.
That's the code language.
Right. And that's also in our panel is Michael Singleton, who is a contributing host to Consider It on the Vox Media on Facebook.
Good Morehouse man.
So but this is why I tell people all the time you have to understand what the game is, Scott. Right. They want to reduce the conversation to you get a check, who gets a check? When one of the points Julian Malveaux made, I'm going to play it in a second, is that no, you must look at this thing from a system standpoint. And even when this guy Coleman says nothing has been studied more, no. There are people who are utterly clueless about the real story. It's how it is being framed. That to me is the fundamental issue.
Well, but that's the whole debate, though. That's what it all comes down to, because the red herrings get you off the main view, the main issue. You know, I call it the tree of slavery. You started the base 400 years ago. You had slaves for 200 years or however long, right? But the manifestations of it, the branches of slavery that lead us to 2019, the manifestations are still there. And so if you say that my ancestors are no longer here, you say that white ancestors of others are no longer here, so why should they pay? Well, why not? It still occurred, and the manifestations are still negatively affecting us. The Germans apologized to the Jews and paid reparations. America apologized to the Japanese who were put in internment camps and apologized. And yet for 200 years, 400 years, we were in slavery, and nobody wants to apologize to us. It seems like we're the largest minority, and so we got the greatest chance to overcome it, but we still struggle with our history of slavery.
The thing for me, Monique, again, when you hear this dude talk about, okay, history, whatever, is not actually understanding the link. When we did the story 2 weeks ago, three African Americans lost $3.2 billion in Chicago alone because of discrimination, housing discrimination. Anyone who saw Skip Gates' documentary on Reconstruction, black folks lost $1.5 billion that was put into the Freedmen's Bank, stolen and squandered by white folks. There was never a bailout.
Right.
$1.5 billion.
Right.
The equivalent of $1.5 billion lost. And so those are things that folks in this country walking around on Capitol Hill have no idea about, because that's history, not his story.
Right, but that wouldn't even matter, Roland, because, and I'm going to get through this on June 19th without crying.
Okay.
But I'm from Galveston, Texas, and so it means something to me, right? Because I've been the places where it was announced, and my great-grandfather was a slave when Gordon Granger showed up and said, today you're free, 2 years after, right, the freedom actually happened. So today means something to me.
Oh, my Lord.
But what it really means is there was a transfer of property that should have happened, and there was a transfer of economy that should have happened right then. Because if so, then we could have afforded to lose $1 billion 100, 200 years later, and it wouldn't have mattered, because wealth transfer starts originating in property. That's what this country is about.
You're talking about wealth.
I'm talking about wealth. I'm not talking about being rich.
Exactly.
I'm not talking about money bags, money bags.
That's right.
I'm talking about wealth transfer, where when you die, there's something that goes to your children, whether you had a dime in the bank or not. They automatically have a leg up. And the history that brother was talking about, yeah, we studied it. And we know it, but we don't apply it. Because right now in Galveston, Texas, I'm rich and I'm wealthy. Why? Because my grandfather, who graduated from Meharry, chose to be a postman instead of being a pharmacist so that he could own property. My grandmother worked in the home, but she was a nurse's assistant. My mother, who's still alive, was a teacher. My daddy worked at a manufacturing company instead of going to play basketball, because they understood what it was about. So today, I'm sitting here and I have real wealth. I can't find no money. God knows I can't for these two. But I don't need nothing, right? And there's a difference. There's a difference. So I agree with that gentleman. I don't know his name, the one they found.
Nobody else know. Don't worry.
Whatever. So, but he was right. It's been studied, Roland. He's right. It's been more studied than anything else, but he's wrong in that. I think what he was saying is, because it's studied, we applied the lesson.
Well, I dare say,
that's the problem.
I dare say it has been fully studied. Before I go to Shermichael, this was after a series of questions from one of the Democratic members of Congress, and it was a brother who was a preacher. He basically pulled Dr. Julian Malveaux into the conversation. So I want y'all to hear this exchange.
But you'd have to go really quickly. I had one question for Mr. Coates, so if you wanted to add something real quick. I'm running out of time.
No, I'm the economist on the panel, so it's a little bit...
No, I know that.
It's a little frustrating that economic questions are being directed to non-economists. Well, I think I have some things that I'd like to be able to say about some of this. But thank you, my brother, for giving me, for passing the mic. I really do appreciate it. The questions about predatory lending really need to, your sister Congresswoman raised, really need to be dealt with, because it's not just that it's something that's happening
if you're going to talk about predatory lending, could you also add, because what I was going to ask him, you could probably answer also, this whole history of the exclusion of blacks from some of the early programs like Social Security and the GI Bill and others, because it all is about economic security. So if you could blend your answer, that would be great, because then I would use up my time and get both questions in.
Sure. I mean, we can go back and look at the minimum wage, which exclude farm workers in the South, which were predominantly black people, excluded domestic workers, who were black women. And so these folks were excluded not only from the minimum wage, but also from the Social Security system. And so your comment about black women in nursing homes is very pointed, given all of that. I mean, we have to look at this. The hearts and minds questions, I'm an economist, so I leave that to the Reverend. But what I want to, but my thing is, let's look at the economic underpinnings of the inequality that exists in this country, the wealth gap that exists in this country, and the differences that it makes. Sister Congresswoman, when you talked about predatory lending, a third of the people who had predatory loans qualified for regular loans, a third of them. However, they did not get them because of the way that slavery, racism basically segregated people. So while it's lovely to sing Kumbaya, which I don't do very often, I think it's even better to talk about what's going on economically and the differences that exist because of the wealth gap. When a black woman, man, is arrested, absent wealth, they lay up in the jail for I don't know how many days because they don't have the home to mortgage to get the bail. And cash bail is discriminatory. And so we can just go down the list and talk about the very many ways that racism affects the quality of folks' lives. And with all due respect to these Kumbaya brothers over here who, you know, I'm proud of my family too. I mean, we good black people too. I have a PhD, I had 2 MBAs in my family, but I'm not going to give you my family history. But you know, it is irrelevant. It is irrelevant when you're dealing with structure. I want y'all, Congress people, to deal with issues of economic structure, and an economic structure has generated an inequality that makes it difficult for people to live their lives. When zip code determines what kind of school that you go to, when zip code determines what kind of food you can eat, these are the vestiges of enslavement that a lot of people don't want to deal with. Forgive my, you know, I'm kind of over the top, but I usually am. Those in the audience who know me know, you know, tick, tick, boom. But the fact is that I'm gratified, Sheila, Congresswoman Jackson Lee, for these hearings, but I'm also frustrated for the tone that some of this has taken because it takes us away from the economic underpinnings of what needs to go on here.
Thank you.
Sure, Michael. The issue that, one, it's the discussion is critically important. And as far as I'm concerned, who the Republicans put up was a waste of time. There are conservative black economists. There are black conservatives who could talk about this issue, even if they oppose it. You put up a dude who's on Fox News, a contributor who played football. I can't listen to him.
I mean, look,
who brings, and literally his entire presentation was, you know, work hard. Like my grandfather told me, my daddy told me, that's how you get ahead. It was like, that's it?
Well, what's interesting about this, so for our Vox Media show, we actually have an episode next week coming out on reparations. And we centered it on Georgetown University, which is the first U.S. institution that has attempted to sort of address repaying the descendants of slaves. So it's academic. It's still the very first, correct, in April. And that was student decided. The university hasn't made a decision yet. But in the research of doing this, we spoke with a Duke University economist. And what the economist was saying was, based upon his calculations, there's about 30 million individuals that he estimated would be able to receive some form of a reparation, whatever that would look like. But going through the history, we discovered President Obama didn't support reparations. And I'm going somewhere here. Joe Biden just announced he doesn't support reparation. And so as we continue to look through this, what we found was not only are there white Republicans who don't necessarily support this, there's also a lot of white Democrats in Congress who don't support this. So looking at it legislatively speaking, we sort of came to the conclusion that even trying to set up a committee to explore this would almost nearly be impossible.
But here's on that point. And so, look, somebody asked me longer, Roland, you support reparations. I'm like, no. Here's why I said it. Because I'm looking at the reality of legislatively. And my whole deal is, this is where they are. Unless you change who's there. That's the key. At the end of the day, I can make the economic and moral argument, okay, why it makes sense. I can go through the history. I can lay out all the facts. It still gets to the question of, will it pass? We're not even at the point, as far as I'm concerned, of having a count to vote discussion. The problem here, Mark, is that we have folks who actually, with all the books and all the studies being done, don't want to contend with dealing with this very system and how it was actually capitalism was created by slaves. Okay, America had no economy. Read Gerald Horne's book on the American Revolution. Read all these books to understand cotton, to understand these things. The reality is you have this system, and it wasn't just for 243 years of slavery. It was 92 years of Jim Crow, slavery by another name. And so when you start breaking all these things down, we have people in this country who don't want to even own up to the reality that white soldiers walked out of World War II with the GI Bill, went in school they wanted to, bought homes in the suburbs, all kind of stuff like that. Well, black soldiers literally could not. That ain't slavery. That's 40s, 50s, 60s. Fair Housing Act wasn't passed till 68. So if the Fair Housing Act was passed, in 68, April 68, and you know it takes really 5 to 10 years for law to jail, if you will, we now in the 80s.
Yeah, well, that's why this is a new and updated H.R. 40. It's H.R. 40 2.0, really, because the original Conyers bill was going to do a study of slavery. This is a study of, everyone stipulates slavery existed, but this is a study of what form reparations would take, not only for slavery, but for slavery's vestiges, which includes lynchings, Jim Crow, segregation, lack of access to capital, being left out of Social Security, Homestead Act, GI Bill, Fair Housing Act, Voting Rights Act, and the current criminal justice system, which includes modern-day lynchings of police violence and mass incarceration. All of that is included in this, and what the two Republican Uncle Toms were not willing to say out loud.
No need to call them Uncle Toms. I don't believe in name calling. Just say we disagree with it.
Well, I apologize. That's just my thing. I
don't believe in Uncle Toms, sellouts, coons, N-word. I can say they black conservatives who are wrong.
But I didn't call them coons.
I know that. Go ahead. Hold on, Monique. Now finish your point. Finish your point, Monique.
Okay, so the point is, what they refuse to acknowledge is that there are vestiges of slavery that still exists. Every form of racism and oppression that we continue to deal with is a vestige of slavery. He mentioned the tree. The term we've always used is vestige. That's the same thing. And so that's what this bill would address and what form reparations would take for all of this inclusive.
Monique.
Right, and everything that he named is accurate, but everything that he named was related to a physical manifestation of slavery. And when Dr. Anita Phillips was on here, what she talked about is the way that slavery has embedded itself into our DNA code as people of color, and how we have suffered psychologically, how we have suffered mentally, how we have suffered socially as black people because of things that happened during slavery that now are a part of our psyche. It makes it less possible for us to succeed. Even if we had certain things that were a grant and a given to people who were not black. So for me, if somebody asks me if I support reparations, I don't know how I say I don't. We have found our way to the moon, right? In this country, have
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
We've gone to the moon.
We're smart.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
So we can't figure out how much you get. I mean, it's not you get a car, you get a car, you get a car. I get it.
Right.
My point is, no, but here's the thing. It's one thing to say we don't have a legislature to get it done. It's another thing to say we don't have the right president. We didn't have a black one. What do we need, a horse? It's one thing to say, come on now, that it's a hard thing. We in this country do hard things. It wouldn't matter if we got it wrong, Shermichael. It wouldn't, because if we got it wrong and he received something and you did and I did, now I don't know about your ancestors, I'm just saying, and you got something. Now listen, okay.
What, just because I'm light-skinned and I get less?
I'm saying a little sketchy.
Yeah.
You and I both, we're not.
That's racist. That's racist.
But my point is, hell, give me $1,000 and let's move forward and figure it out again. No, because the argument, Roland, that people are trying to make is that we shouldn't get anything.
Oh, no, I understand that.
That is garbage.
And Scott, what Scott
That's
Michael,
not true.
What bothers me again is when, and again, look, game recognized game. if you want to have this conversation and it stops at 1863. But I can't ignore what took place with the Great Compromise of 1876.
Right.
And it became the Great Compromise, actually the election of 1876, and the Great Compromise of 1877. I can't ignore where literally black folks, and Julianne talked about it, I didn't play it, the black folks she talked who were run out of town. Black people who literally left land they owned.
That's right.
Black people who were so oppressed by racism and bigotry, packed their stuff up and left Mississippi and Alabama and Texas and Arkansas. Left land. I can't forget.
And went north. If they didn't, they went north.
All right, I can't forget the black folks who also had the land stolen by racists. The history, and see, where the study comes up, where I think Homeboy is wrong, is that if you actually study black folks since actually 1619, what you will see is bootstraps, pull down.
Yeah.
Pull bootstraps up,
right.
Pull back down. I can show you a line from 1619 to present day where black folks pull bootstraps up, pull back down, and the last big pull down was in 2007, 2008 with the home foreclosure crisis when 53% of black wealth was wiped out because of that. That was black folks bootstrapping up. That's actually been our history. When we have done that, got pulled back down.
That's a good point. Calculate all the bootstraps coming down, up, and down. Monetize it, right? That's a number, or a series of numbers, if you will. The other thing I want your listening audience to understand is I heard Mitch McConnell and others talk about, I don't know whether we could do this constitutionally or not. Are you kidding me? This is an allocation.
Well, hell, you
it's
just
a
gave,
budget.
just gave $28 billion. Just gave $28 billion to farmers who got screwed by the tariffs. And hell, that wasn't even a vote.
So don't go for the okay. It's a budget item. It is a budget item.
Sure, Michael. Again, that for me is why I disagree with Homeboy when he said we've studied it, because I don't know, we haven't really owned up to it. I'm gonna tell you this story before I want you to speak.
Okay.
I spoke at a black construction conference. It was at National Harbor a few years ago. So I meet this sister, and her job is to ensure that you don't have front construction groups in North Carolina. So she tells me she meets the largest construction company in North Carolina. She says, how'd y'all get started? And the guy says, well, our daddy was in the Army. And when World War II ended, our daddy said that, you know what, I want to start my own construction company. So he went to the bosses who were white. Hey, we got this surplus paving equipment and stuff. Can I just have some of it?
Yep.
And they said, yeah.
Whatever.
Homeboy leaves the Army with a government handout.
Yep.
Starts a construction company. Builds it up. And to this day, his sons and their sons and daughters are now the beneficiaries of a government handout. You can't show me a black soldier who left with a shovel.
Yep.
But his business was started with Army surplus equipment and making millions of dollars. So not only did he have free equipment, he could apply for the contracts. So even if a black soldier was given free equipment, they couldn't even apply for the contracts. So when I hear McConnell and others talk about, oh, it was so long ago, no, I can show you black people who are living today.
The vestiges.
Who could not even bid for a contract if they had equipment, couldn't apply for the jobs, couldn't buy a home in a certain place. So as a result, black person over here bought a house in the neighborhood. House may have been $12,000. The white person's house was $35,000. They couldn't even sell the house for $12,000 when they tried to sell it. They sold it for like $12,100. So they made $100 on the house. Yet the person over here resold the house for $40,000. They got $5,000 from it. Guess what? That ain't slavery. That's still the American story. That to me is why you have to have a real conversation that brings it up to present day of how black folks have been economically denied in this nation.
Well, what's interesting about this is not only was the nation's wealth built off of free slave labor, you talk about many American businesses. Wells Fargo, for example, Brooks Brothers, for example. You talk about
all the insurance companies.
You talk about the Ivy League universities, the Georgetowns, the Harvards, the Yales, all essentially off of the selling of slaves in order to stay open. Correct. So I think this is a very nuanced situation that I don't think a lot of politicians, just to be honest and frank, aren't really interested in learning more about, which is why I do agree that we need to have some type of a committee to explore this further, because I think there's this sort of understanding that, oh, it's just going to be free checks, we don't want to do that. Well, this is a far more complex issue that we need to address. And I don't know any black person who's saying, I want anything free. I think what people are saying is we want to make sure that we have the same playing field as everyone else. And that currently does not exist because of systemic racism that can be traced back to slavery.
Which is the same, which is what?
But we don't need another study. It's a waste of time. The McConnells of the world, and I respect Shermichael's position on this, but sure, they'll say they don't get it. They'll say they don't get it, and we'll be 3 more administrations past getting it with a study about how we can figure out just how much we are really owed. No.
So how do you
put a metric on it then? Tell me your metric on everything that Roland just said.
And this is why. Maybe you can't. You go back to what we all agree on. Slavery bad, right?
Yeah.
Is anybody disagreeing? Okay, no.
Well, some folks.
Hello.
Some say we were glad to be there.
But you know what? And even still, because, Scott, you and I, as lawyers, we know that if you keep people against their will and you force them to do labor for however much time, there is a very easy system, a calculus for what they are owed for that. And then we, from there, figure out, oh, okay, you kept them from that, and then when they were freed, they didn't get property. Oh, okay, and they didn't get property, and when they got money, they couldn't get a bank loan. No.
Would you,
we have to start.
Scott, go.
We have to start.
Scott, go.
Right. Well, would you take 40 acres and a mule? Which is another broken promise America made to people of color, or black people rather?
Here's what I am
Would you take it today?
Hell yes, give me my 40 acres right now. I'm not saying I'm finished because we have a constitution, right? So I can still sue, I can still ask for more, I can still re-legislate, I can still elect people like you. Give me my 40 acres and then let's talk. Give me my 1 mule for my land and then let's have a conversation, because what I can do with 40 acres right now, 40 acres where? New York?
I just
40 acres in New York City.
You're going off today.
Look, I just wonder not to be stuck in politics or the legislative process, but that's what I love. And I'm just trying to figure out, even if we are able to assign some type of a numerical value to this, how do you get it through Congress? Even if we ignore the McConnells, let's say we don't set up a committee, let's say it's $1 trillion, we all agree to it. How do you get it?
Here's to that point, and that's why when somebody asked me this about 10 years ago, I was like, look, if you want to spend, somebody say, Roland, why aren't you spending more time in reparations? I said, I'm looking at votes. I said, I'm practically not counting votes. Right. I said, that's where I stand. I said, there are people who support it. I said, who are fighting for it. I said, you know what? I'll put them on the air. I said, and have them tell the story. I said, but I look at finite time. The reality is this. Why the study? Why the breakdown? Everything that you said, why does it all matter? Because like anything else that is passed in this country, you have to create resonance. You have to create momentum to where you frame that. Look, how many people literally said, there ain't no way in hell we're going to be able to get the right to vote? Right. After Kennedy gets killed, look, everybody forgets the original civil rights bill that Dr. King and others supported had all of it in one. LBJ was like, I can't get all of it in one. The original civil rights, first of all, there was a 1960 Civil Rights Act. After Kennedy dies, LBJ goes, okay, I can't get all that in one. It was broken up into 3 pieces. 64, Civil Rights Act, which was public accommodations. 65 was voting. 68 was housing. He said, I'm going to get it, but I can't get all of it at once. You have to create that, which is where voting comes in. So when I hear people say, unless this happens, I ain't voting, if you don't vote, it's not going to happen.
No.
Because here's the deal. You amenable to your argument.
Okay.
To your argument. Your argument.
But healthcare is a much more timely and relevant example to me. So we need.
And that took 50 years.
No. But okay.
Actually, I'm sorry.
But we're
no,
right
actually, 150 years.
But we're here.
No,
and
but
so
what I'm saying
how
is long it took
for
for
everybody
it to
who
get
asks,
passed.
and I support no candidate. But what I will say is, right now, every front runner but Biden says yes to reparations. So we need a reparations Democratic candidate because Trump is a non-starter. So we need a Democratic candidate, and then we need a Democratic House because that's how we got health care, right? So, and we need whatever version of a bill we can get where something is passed.
To the Senate,
Actually,
hold
on one second.
I said what we need.
Actually, you had Democratic President, House, and Senate.
That's
how guys
and 2020 is viable for that
it certainly is,
if we're about our business.
I'm not certain, though.
Final comment on this.
Even if realistically we were able to get a magic wand and grant what you're asking for.
No magic wand, just votes.
Or votes. I'm just not even convinced that if Democrats control the House or the Senate, that you would have enough votes, because you have to look at some of the districts that some of those members even represent. But I'm not convinced some of those white members.
But here's the deal, Mark.
Vote
but hold on. First of all, I agree.
Just being honest.
No. First of all, I agree with your point. But here's the piece. You don't need 435 or 100, Mark.
Thank God.
What you need is you need 218 in the House.
Well, that's true.
We'll never get it.
You need a simple majority or 60 in the Senate. And then what you actually, and I dare say, you actually need more than that, because assume it's going to be a veto, even if it's a Democratic president. Right. So the bottom line, but again, to the people who are watching, Mark, I want you to speak to this. This is the final comment.
Okay.
If you got 60 people who sign on now,
right,
and the next session you got 90, you picked up 30.
That's right.
The problem I have is with folks who don't understand that, look, it is not going to happen in a year. But if you decide to not vote, you have absolute guaranteed it will never happen.
Or longer. Well, you know, there were some people there today that have been propagandized that way. But I was watching people today. And afterwards, I talked to some of those people, and they couldn't come up with an argument against anything that was said.
Yeah.
So just like all of our struggles, they've taken time. We didn't know we'd be here today on this Juneteenth 2019, and I'm very moved by the story you told, by the way, about your great-grandfather. We didn't know right now that we'd be having a hearing on reparations right now. We didn't know all this enthusiasm would come forward. We can't time it, but our generation has to continue to struggle, and sometime, if not in our lifetime, the next generation will see this to fruition. But you're absolutely right. I think this can get done. It won't be tomorrow. And it is wrong to say to people, if it's not resolved by 2020, they're not going to vote. It is an ongoing struggle. And on this Juneteenth, I'll simply close by saying, in the words of Frederick Douglass, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. So we can't stop.
And for the folks who understand voting, you could talk about 15th Amendment all day. But then you had the 65 Voting Rights Act. Okay? And you're still dealing with that. So that's our history. In Phoenix, one of the worst cases of abuse of police power we have seen in a long time. A 4-year-old, without her parents' knowledge, walks out of a dollar store with a doll. Let me repeat that. A dollar store with a doll. Then this happened.
Police?
Yeah.
It doesn't open. I promise it doesn't open. You're gonna fucking get shot. Get your fucking hands off.
Get out the fucking car. Get out the fucking car right now. Yes, get out now. Get out the fucking car.
You fucking hear it? Get out the fucking car.
You recording it?
Yeah, I'm recording it.
Put your hands up. I don't give a shit. Put your hands up. Hands up.
Break your feet. When I tell you to do something, you fucking do it.
I'm sorry. I'm just on the side.
You're not complying with me.
Yes, I am.
When I tell you to do something, you fucking do it.
I am. I'm complying with everything, sir.
Okay, right now, shut your mouth.
Hey, hey! Whoa, sir, come down!
Oh, wait.
When I tell you to do something, you fucking do it.
Where the girl at?
You're not complying with me. When I tell you to do something, you fucking do it. I am. I'm complying. Okay, right now, shut your mouth.
Oh, look at these kids. Y'all get it.
Can I get the babies? Excuse me? Can I get the kids? Excuse me? Officer,
Duffy,
can I
shut
get
up.
the kids?
Duffy, go get her kids.
Can I
Go get her kids. Duffy, go get her kids. Hurry up. He needs to slow down, and those kids is right there. Duffy, go get her kids. Hurry up. Duffy, go get her kids, and the lady is pregnant. Duffy, go get her kids. She bringing it.
Folks, the mayor of Phoenix has apologized for the behavior of these cops, but they still have their jobs pending an investigation. Also, Jay-Z is also paying for their attorney. And the parents had no idea their child even took the doll out of the store. They were completely in the dark. Now, let's go to Arkansas, where a cop who clearly wanted to shoot this black driver, but he was not taking the bait. Watch this.
What I do wrong?
Shut your car off.
Come on, shoot me.
Shut your car off.
You want to shoot me?
Got a gun.
Where?
Gun.
Where?
Shut the car
Where?
off.
Where? My hand in the air.
Shut the car off. Shut
Nah, hey, come shut the car off. I ain't moving my hands. He trying to shoot me. He trying to shoot me.
Shut the car off.
Nah, I ain't moving. No, my hand in the air.
Shut the car off.
My hand in the air. My hand in the air. My hand in the air. My hand in the air.
These units at Midland Heights.
My hand in the air. My hand in the air.
All you gotta do is drive up.
What I was doing? What was I doing? What was I doing? My hand in the air. My hand in the air.
Failure to comply with the lawful
Shoot
order.
me. My hand in the air.
I'm not gonna shoot you, but you're not gonna move those hands.
My hand in the air. My hand in the air. You tell me to shut my car off so you can shoot me. Come on now.
The cop says all you had to do was drive off. The man then says, what did I do? He couldn't tell him what he did. You remember the front of the video, the cop said, gun. There was no gun. He was straight lying. But he was speaking into the radio and the body camera. That's what he was trying to also cover up. Finally, in Baltimore, a police officer got angry when a bystander criticized him for the way he was detaining another man. Listen and watch what this cop did.
Why don't you mind your business? You need to stop that man sitting on the ground. 30. You got him? You got him? I'm not running nowhere. Sir, get off me, sir. Sir, don't grab. Sir, get off me. Get the off me. Hey, look at it. You did a blowing Ashton. Yo, what the y'all? Oh my God. I'm suing y'all, yo. I'm suing y'all, yo. I'm record on the ground. Get on the ground now. Man, you better get on the ground. Yo, what the fuck? Get on the ground. Get your knee off of me. Get on the ground. You that better on Ashton. Bro. Damn, Rob. Yo, get on the ground. Hey, call my wife. Ground. Sit down. Call my wife. Sit down. Sit down. I'm not sitting on no ground, yo. I'm not sitting on no ground. I'm not standing on the ground. Put him on the ground. Relax. Yo, take these hands. Beat that shit out you, yo. Relax. I ain't even do nothing, man. Be quiet. Stand over here. Stand over there. Stand over there. That's Sean right there. Stand over there. Stand over there. I'm listening. I'm walking out there from the credit spot. I asked him, I said, why they got a man on the ground? He came in, he charged me, rocked me, kicked me all on the ground. Why you checking me? That is illegal. He's under arrest, yes. For what? For what? When am I under arrest? Just got in jail. Take your charge like a man. For what? Take your charge. What am I going to jail for? Because you don't know how to act. Do you hear this? I don't know how to act. Hey, search him. He hasn't been searched.
The officer in Baltimore has been criminally charged, false imprisonment, misconduct in office. He was charged with assault. You heard him say, take your charge like a man, because he dared to literally question him. My pound, Dr. Cleo Monago, socio-political analyst and activist. Janice L. Mathis, Esquire, Executive Director, National Council of Negro Women, and Dr. Nyambe Carter, Department of Political Science, Howard University. Cleo, you work with law enforcement in Los Angeles. I want to show all of those back to back to back, because all we keep hearing, good cops, oh, few bad apples, but you saw what happened in Phoenix, in Brooklyn, in Arkansas, in Baltimore, all white cops, and how they were hyper-aggressive, targeting black people. And you literally have cops pulling guns out in Phoenix over a doll in a dollar store?
Roland, as you know, we've been talking about this issue for years. Maybe it's been, I don't know, almost 10 years now. And I have to reiterate, because this is redundant as well. I have to be redundant. I'm so glad that somebody invented these video smartphones, because as a result of that, as we know, we get to see these things going down. And I'm even more excited to hear that in each one of these incidences, apparently, the cops have been apprehended in terms of being questioned and put in some type of punishment for what they've done, possibly. But what I'm concerned about, as usual, first of all, I'm very traumatized right now myself. That back-to-back craziness was difficult. I have to keep myself from crying, because I'm not trying to be crying on camera. But anyway, we have to be talking to our children about this, because the brother mentioned earlier about the young man in Brooklyn who was traumatized. It's important to understand that witnesses to this are traumatized. Black boys in particular, who wonder when their turn is going to come, are traumatized. And we got to talk to our children and alert them that it's not their fault. The attorney also mentioned that people that he had spoken to said that he must have done something. And I just hope it becomes clear to us, I'm talking about black people now, that when we see a brother or a sister in handcuffs being led to the police department, does not necessarily mean they actually done something. Because we have some anti-black impulses that we've been trained through media and through all the negative messaging that we have not really talked about as a people, so we can unlearn and unpack those impulses. And it's a good idea that people are filming this stuff. And I'm going to close with this. As I say every time, most of these cases don't make the media. Most of these cases, people don't think about taking their phones out. They're too traumatized to remember to do that. So black people, we need to step up and do something about this. Members of Congress, people who are in influential positions, we need to look at the fact that our children, our people, black men especially, and black people are being traumatized and assaulted for doing nothing. A doll coming out of a doll store. And cops are dealing, you talking about road rage, we're dealing with dysfunctional cop rage in this country. With cops taking out their fantasies on to control and take down black people because they have that fantasy, and they get to do it now because they got a gun.
Janice Mathis, when you look at this, when you look at all of these different cases, when you look at what's behind them, the case in Brooklyn, a young man just walking down the street, and all of a sudden looks up, and then he's taken to the ground by cops. Hell yes, this is traumatic for black people. And look, I'm here in Dallas right now, and you had a white man who was shot and killed today who went to the federal building, armed, Kevlar vest. I mean, he was ready for war. He was taken down. I mean, literally, it is a shock that black people have not gone to the extent of these crazy white extremists when it comes to their paramilitary gear, or literally how we are treated just walking while black.
Well, Roland, there are two forces that seem to be exacerbating what we're seeing. I, too, was stunned and shocked to watch those successive videos. I shouldn't be surprised. 30 years of practicing law in Georgia, I saw cases like that at least several times a year. But there are two forces. One is this rage, this enragement, this utter disgust and refusal to see black people as human beings entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that somehow young African-American men and black men in general and black people in general are just not quite human. We don't have to treat them quite like him. But the other thing is there's a permissiveness in the air that is exacerbating these feelings of low self-worth, competition that some people feel that they are losing.
Yeah.
I keep thinking about, you will not replace me. Who's trying to replace you? And where do you feel like you're being replaced at? That rage, but it is being fed and aided and abetted and exacerbated by what's going on in this administration. And we fool ourselves. But I think if there is a solution, it's going to come from doing a better job of screening. I don't believe in implicit bias, frankly. And I don't believe that you can train these kind of instincts out of people. The best you can do is avoid hiring racists in the first place as police officers. And we need to pay them better. But I am not a fan of saying there's more training. The law needs to be changed too, because this idea that anytime a cop says, well, I was afraid, well, think about how that young man must have felt saying, my hands are in the air. Now, he's got a gun pointed at him. And he's got to say over and over and over again. My heart started beating fast for him, because I kept wondering, when is this fool going to lose his composure and start shooting? My hands are in the air.
But, Roland, I want to say something just real quick. I promise I can be brief here.
Hold on, Cleo, 1 second. Dr. Carter, I want you to weigh in.
Sure.
So, yeah, I mean, the only reason I could watch these videos today was because I knew no one died in them. And that's the really unfortunate part of all of this, is that death is so common, we don't think about the less spectacular cases where people are just harassed. I mean, this woman in Phoenix was told to put her 1-year-old not walking baby on the ground, right, where that baby would have been burned, and God knows what they would have done to her, right, had she put that baby down. So it's all of these cases just show us how willing we are to believe police narratives. And honestly, in all of these cases, I think the police wanted these people to be shot and killed, because then they don't have a counter story. Because whether it's the man in Arkansas yelling gun, even though the guy clearly had his hands in the air and was no gun present, whether it's a Barbie doll in Phoenix, all these people needed some small provocation, even not, right? Because in Brooklyn, this young boy, and I can't even call him a young man, he's a boy, is walking home, and thank God for bystanders. Thank God for that woman in that yellow dress who walked around the police officers who were clearly trying to block her line of sight, and the young man in Baltimore who was talking about the lack of respect paid to us in our communities, sitting on the curb, people driving by, you're assumed to be a criminal. They were doing a warrant check. They didn't know whether this man had a criminal record. He had no charge against him, but he was being detained, and that young man said something about it, because it's a routine disrespect. And that young man in that video who's saying he's going to sue the Baltimore Police Department, his harassment hasn't stopped because he's not had those criminal charges dropped. They've charged him with something else, because what they do, like they did after that Eric Garner case, and as they do after so many of these cases, the police will continue to surveil you, they will harass you, they will harass your people, the people around you, your community, hoping that you trip up, because they were going to get him on something because he was being smart, right? I mean, that's the only thing that cop didn't like, that he had the nerve to say something.
I'm arresting you because you don't know how to act.
Exactly.
You don't know how to act.
Right.
That ain't against
you
the
don't
law.
know how to act, and then take it like a man.
Yes.
And the thing that was also interesting is that in all these cases, not a single time has the police union, Fraternal Order Police, said, damn it, you know what? Our people are wrong.
That's right.
This shouldn't have happened. Cleo, go ahead.
I also want to mention, just inspired by what I just heard, that 5 of the people that were involved in Ferguson who were protesters are dead mysteriously. So I want to mention that in terms you mentioned surveillance, et cetera. But I want to say that
that's a story that we've covered, trying to understand, what is going on there. And look, there's still no answers, and they're unsolved. 2 of them actually were found shot and burned in their cars. But go ahead.
She mentioned Trump, and I want to tell you, I worked at the East Los Angeles Sheriff Department in the late 80s. The same exact thing we just saw on video, because I witnessed with my own eyes, was one of the reasons why I quit and resigned from the police department, was going on back then. I want to make us real clear, because of Trump's insanity and how ridiculous and extreme he is, we're making a correlation. But I want people to know that, this kind of behavior and attacks and assaulting a black person. One time I was driving down the 10 freeway in Los Angeles, and I saw a sheriff. It was a woman parked on the side of the freeway, and he was literally banging his car into her car and pushing her car sideways. You understand what I'm saying? Her car was turned sideways, and he was pushing her car with the car. And I got out the car and said, "What's going on?" And he threatened to kill me. And I was working for the sheriff's department at this time. So I just want to say, just real quickly, that this is not new.
I'm not saying
it's this
new.
thing right here that's making it come to attention. We've been getting killed like this for a long time.
I really don't. One second. It's not new. It's not new.
She may be late.
But here's the piece here, Janice. The difference that we have here. 2 things. 1, you have proliferation of video cameras. Everybody now has a phone. 2, the reason it does matter when you talk about Trump is because under Jeff Sessions, under Bill Barr, the Attorney General, they have executed a strategy where they do not want to hold cops accountable. All Donald Trump does is go in front of cops and praise them and lavish them. Jeff Sessions said we're going to pull back on consent decrees because it was hurting the morale of cops. This administration and white Republicans do not want to hold cops accountable because they want them to keep doing this type of stuff.
I agree with that.
Yes, absolutely.
I agree with that.
Janice, go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking that when you think about the fact that the consent decrees were not just abandoned but reversed, you had the Justice Department switch sides in the case in Ferguson and in Baltimore, and to actively oppose the consent decrees. The judges that are flooding the federal benches that will be there for the rest of my lifetime and beyond, who can be counted on to find excuses for police misbehavior. It's difficult for me to understand how that could not exacerbate what we're seeing in the streets.
But Roland, there has been polls taken on the attitudes between blacks and whites about the police for the past 20 years. And no matter what goes down in terms of how they attack black people, most whites keep saying that what the police is doing is fine.
But
Democrat and Republican.
But I think it's a both and proposition. Both things can be true. No, I think it's a both and proposition. I think both of what you guys are saying can be true at the same time.
Sure.
And I think we also need to talk more clearly about the police unions, because police have always been weapons of the state used to discipline black bodies for any manner of things that the state wanted to do. But I do think these police unions, we have got to have a way to criticize them more clearly and confront them, because the power that they have, it's obscene. And the fact that they won't even see something like this and say, this does not represent us, lets us know that these people are not here to protect us, but to keep lining their own pockets and keep their pensions and everything else for them and their brothers.
All right, folks, back to that Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just 1 month. All right, folks, they're back. MarijuanaStock.org has another great investment opportunity. If you were lucky enough to invest in their last crowdfunding campaign, you know they raised a lot of money in just a few months investing in legal marijuana farms. Those initial investors now own shares of a publicly traded company. And, of course, they're excited by that. Now they have a new investment opportunity that is as good, if not better, than the last. I'm talking about industrial hemp CBD. For those who don't know, the hemp plant is a cousin to marijuana, of course, and then it has a higher concentration of CBD, which means hemp CBD gives you all of the medical benefits of marijuana without getting you high. Now, until recently, hemp farming was practically illegal in the U.S. and heavily regulated by the DEA. However, that changed with the 2018 Farm Bill, making it legal to grow hemp CBD in the U.S. and creating one of the largest commodities worldwide. They need land to grow all of the plants, and this makes for an incredible investment opportunity. And that's where our good friends at 420 Real Estate come in. Their business model is simple. They buy land that supports hemp CBD grow operations and lease it to licensed, high-paying tenants. That's right, they are hemp CBD landlords, and you can get in on the action. You can invest in this crowdfunding campaign for as little as $200 up to $10,000. All right, folks, all you got to do is go to marijuanastock.org. That's marijuanastock.org if you want to get in the game. And if you do so, do it now. Now back to your Roland Martin Unfiltered video. All right, folks, I got to go. This is my last story. And you know what? We might as well deal with Stuck on Stupid to end the week. And this, he always does this. So on Fox News. So first of all, here's what you have right now. You got a whole bunch of Republicans, Dinesh D'Souza and others, who want to make the argument that racism and slavery and Jim Crow was all Democrats. And it was all because of Democrats. So Larry Elder, of course, the one who wrote a book called Stupid Black Men, sounded like a stupid person when he went on Fox News and said this.
We need affordable health care.
Right.
So he's basically saying what you said about stop living in the past. Let's move forward and focus on how we can improve. And then also you had Burgess Owens, who the athlete, the Oakland Raider, he was in there and he said, listen, I used to be a Democrat. He said the party, that is the party of slavery. And when I did some investigating, I realized that's why I need to leave the party. And he also said that we need to focus on black children doing better on test scores. And he mentions what's happening in the state of California.
Well, that's right. Only about 5% of white people have any sort of generational connection to slavery. The government did not own slaves. Republicans did not own slaves. Democrats owned slaves. Democrats founded the KKK. Democrats opposed the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment. As a percentage of the party, more Republicans voted for the Civil Rights Act of 1964 than did Democrats. Maybe Democrats ought to sue themselves for reparation.
CJ. Are you, as a black conservative, are you embarrassed by Larry Elder?
I mean, there are some things I agree with Larry on and some things I disagree with Larry on.
But are you consistently embarrassed by him sound like a damn fool?
Well, depending on what the subject matter is. So, no, I can't say...
Eugene, he was lying, Eugene. First of all, Dinesh D'Souza tweeted out that if anyone can prove to me that Republicans own slaves, I will take these tweets down. Historian Kevin Cruz put his foot in his ass, and he went tweet after tweet showing Republicans who were slave owners. I don't understand why Larry Elder and people on Fox News have this fascination that somehow that white supremacy was a democratic thing. White supremacy was a white thing. There's, in fact, look, President Herbert Hoover was the leader of the Lily White movement.
Mm-hmm.
He was a Republican.
Yeah. I mean, look, we don't have to go into history. We can stay here in 2019. In 2019, we have a sitting member of Congress that wants to repeal the 14th Amendment because it grants birthright citizenship. That is a current sitting member of Congress, Steve King. And I'll answer your question. As a black Republican, as a black conservative, hell yeah, I am absolutely every day embarrassed by Larry Elder and a lot of other folks that get airtime on Fox News. It's absolutely embarrassing. It's embarrassing to the black community. The thing is this, there may be hard for folks to directly tie their ancestry to the direct slave owners, but I put it like this. Every single white person in America has benefited from the institution of slavery and the way a lot of policies and economic opportunities are applied today. If we didn't have the economic history that we have here in this country, there'd be no need for set-asides. We wouldn't have to have this conversation. But because of redlining, because of the need of things like the Fair Housing Act and the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, here we are today.
Erica, it's a lie. Republicans did own slaves. Democrats own slaves. Guess what? There have been racist Democrats, racist Republicans. And what Larry Elder also does not want to own up to, that Southern Dixiecrats align with conservative Republicans to try to stop the Voting Rights Act of 65 and the Civil Rights Act of 64. What Larry Elder also does not want to mention is that it was Republicans who also filibustered the Fair Housing Act. It was a Republican, okay, who was like, we are not moving on this. And so we can sit here and play games all day, and I love them trying to sit here and pin this. But here's the deal. Since the Civil Rights Act of 64, which, of course, Barry Goldwater opposed. Right. The reality is the Republican Party has flipped. The Republican Party today is the opposition party. They are against civil rights. They are against affirmative action. They are in support of voter suppression. They consistently advocate for policies that denigrate, degrade, and actually limit the future of African Americans. It's just a fact. Erica, go ahead.
Absolutely, Roland, and you said it perfectly. And we saw this mass exodus of Republicans, you know, starting back in the late 40s and continuing on to the 70s and 80s. As you mentioned, they are Dixiecrats. LBJ said that after signing both of those historical acts that you named, one of which has been gutted back in 2013, that provides voter protections, particularly for black and brown communities, that he knew that he had delivered, okay? He delivered the vote and lost the South to Republicans. So honestly, this is less about party. This is about slave owners who were white women and men. And so that is something that needs to be accounted for. But what is very unfortunate is that we're living in a climate of sound bites, and so that there are people that don't really care about the context or that don't have the historical context to understand that this has never been about party. This has always been about upholding whiteness.
Well, what you got is Fox News will never have somebody on the opposite side to actually provide those facts, which are critically important. And so they'll trot out the Burgess Owens of the world. They'll trot out Larry Elder. They'll trot out Candace Owens. They'll trot out all of those people, none of them who seem to have ever actually read a book to understand what the truth is when it comes to policies in this country. And so the operative word in white supremacy is white.
Yep.
And folks need to understand that. And again, if any of y'all out there, if you are a conservative and you want to disagree with me, fine. I want you to go type in Google Herbert Hoover and the Lily White Party. That was a faction of the Republican Party that aligned with the KKK, and they wanted nothing to do with black people. Herbert Hoover was one of the most racist presidents in American history. He was a Republican, and he was followed eventually by a grand racist in Woodrow Wilson, who was a Democrat. You know what that means? Two white men, one Democrat, one Republican, both of them were racist. That is simply outrageous. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.
This is Diala Riddle, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered. Stay woke.
This is Director X, the director of Superfly on the red carpet, or the black carpet, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Yo, what up, y'all? This is Jay Ellis, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hi, I'm Chaley Rose, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
I'm Lex Scott Davis, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's your boy Jacob Lattimore, and you're now watching Roland Martin right now.
You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it. Hey fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered, the blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play.